so when my middle son was 5, a neo-Nazi had driven down from Washington and decided to get off and get gas in Granada Hills, California. And he saw a Jewish community center on the sign, and he thought he'd go kill the next generation of Jews, and my kids were there. So I was the first civilian on scene,
Jeez.
and my son was covered in blood. So he lived, okay? My kids are alive, and people said, "Yeah, but they're alive. There's no trauma." Now, remember, this was 1999. It was August 10th, 1999. Okay? We knew nothing about trauma like we do today. Okay? So none of us were treated. Well, I that turned into the worst PTS tailspin of my life. It took me into addiction. It took me into horrible behavior, okay? And my kids were traumatized.
Welcome to Authentic Conversations with Ryan James Miller. Join Ryan as he speaks with top business leaders and influencers, and hear how they've mastered the art of authenticity to achieve all that they dreamed of. As you hear from these leaders, seek not only to be inspired by their authenticity, but to strive for and master your own.
Well, welcome everybody to another episode of Authentic Conversations. This conversation is going to be super duper fun. I can already tell, both because of a quick connection that I have had with this woman previously, but then also this morning and the way that we entered into this conversation. And you're going to hear about what I heard earlier, which is just kind of funny, but at the same time, you're going to feel some empathy right away. I found Shari Lueck by way of recommendation, referral through LinkedIn. She was connected. I'm pretty sure I should have asked this before, but I think it was Nancy Giacalone that had recommended her to me. You've heard me talk about Nancy before. She's a client of mine, great woman, owner in the insurance world. And so I was just stoked to be connected to Shari. Shari is a coach. She works with overachievers, gifted leaders, and she's going to get into specifically what she does. It was interesting offline. We were talking about the fact that as a coach, it's hard to define specifically what you do, maybe in a couple of words or even a sentence. So we'll dig into that too. But for now, Shari, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me, Ryan. It's really, I feel honored to be here. And it's so funny the way you said, like, how we just sort of started off real quick. And, as anybody who's never met a stranger knows, and I've never met a stranger, I take it you haven't either. So there's not a lot of fluff. And it's really funny because a lot of people that I work with say working with me is like working with an old friend. And of course, the older I get, to drop the old, because I'm really becoming the old friend. But it's nice when you can just have some fun with somebody. And the reason I was so excited to be a part of this was because authenticity is a word that is tossed around like baloney back in my childhood, right? And and people don't understand what authenticity really is. And so they talk about authenticity and they talk about vulnerability without even having a clue. So I love that your sort of mantra, be happy, be you, be authentic, is so in line with mine, right? And so it's just fun to meet somebody who gets it without needing an explanation.
Yeah, no, it's good. Okay, so you shared this funny story, and you can't keep it private once you share it. Like, there's certain things that you can keep private, but you had quite an interesting day yesterday. And by the time people hear this, it's going to be a lot of yesterdays yesterday. But why don't you share with us a little bit about what happened? Because I think that, as we get older and we encounter more physical challenges, particularly, it really taps into our resilience and our need to press on and press through things. So you live in Missouri, unlike California right now, it's pretty cold there. You guys have some snow, some ice. And so you took a trip yesterday, did you not?
I took a trip. I had a nice trip. So
All the young kids listening to this are like, what the hell did you just say? You know, it was a saying.
have a
You
nice
guys
trip.
can't get it.
Have a nice trip. I'll see you in the fall, right? So, um, all the bad dad jokes are still bad dad jokes,
Yeah, yeah.
right? So, resilience is another one of those funny words that people seem to miss. And I think what you said just really sums it up. And I'll share the story. But resilience is being able to press on no matter what life hands you,
Mm.
whether it be by choice or by chance. And anybody who knows my story, and a lot of people know my story because I wrote the really good, juicy, embarrassing parts in a book that was published last year called My Skeletons Have Names. But my story has a lot of trauma and a lot of abuse. And so resiliency takes on a whole new level when you're able to continue and climb on and leave glass shattered in your resistance, not because somebody broke a window, but because I rose so many levels of success in spite of
Mm.
it. And so my little day yesterday was really almost comical, like you said, in the face of things we face. But so I am originally from Southern California, and the last few days I have been saying that I am missing the blue sky. So anybody who has ever watched the Rose Bowl on New Year's Day knows exactly what I'm talking about because I think it's been cloudy or rained once in like the history of all Rose Bowls, right? And I sit here with a effective sunlight on my desk. I'll turn it on so you can see it. So, because that's my California sky. And
Ah,
so, yeah, so my husband was diagnosed with COVID yesterday, and both he and I are immunocompromised. And so it's been something we've been super cautious to avoid.
mm.
He most likely got it at work, even though everybody is masked and careful. But it seems to be traveling around his office, much like the cold and a handshake.
Hmm.
And I was trying to be super sweet and nice and find some ways to take care of him in between my calls. And I had my big group meeting last night. I have a coaching program that is a group, and I like to get outside and get some fresh air. And I was in search of the blue sky, although it was gray. There was no snow on the ground, but it looked like it had rained. But I had been in the house, right? And so I thought it had rained, and I went, oh, okay. So I looked, it wasn't raining anymore, and I went to walk the dog. And I had sneakers on, and I got my right foot in front of the other, my left foot, and then my right foot stepped down on my stoop off of the covered landing.
Mm.
And I looked like something right out of the Flintstones, or I don't even know, but I I could hear the noise like and I flew. It had to be 3 feet up in the air, really no exaggeration.
Uh,
At least my feet went that high up in the air, but my head landed on the step,
uh,
and the rest of my body obviously followed. And my husband was inside and he heard me scream and he came outside, and I'm not sure if I lost consciousness or not, but I was very confused when he was standing there.
mm.
I have a baseball sized knot on the back of my head and a little black eye I've done a really good job of covering up. And I showed you the bruise. My bruise is, I don't know, what's that? Maybe 8 inches in,
Baseball, right? Yeah, at
maybe eight
least.
inches in diameter on my lower back. And I definitely have whiplash. I feel just, oh my gosh. And it's funny.
It's funny, and yet for a minute there, right, as we get older, it's not so funny because, when we were, 5, 10, 13 years old, slip and fall. And whether it's your mom or your friends at that time, it's like, get up, dust it off. Like, we don't dust things off, right? I mean, it's not quite that easy. And not even, I know you were saying this morning, it's like, I think maybe I have a concussion, which you got to be careful about. And, it's just going to take some time. And so you're kind of gingerly stepping back into normality. Like, and I'm sure you're going to gingerly take your steps out onto the front steps now for quite a while afterwards.
Yeah, he salted them right after that.
Ah,
And I really having trouble moving. I have a concussion. I've had plenty of concussions. I know what a concussion is, right? And this eye really hurts behind the eye. So, but I don't think I have brains. I probably have some brain swelling because that's what a concussion is.
yeah.
But there's oozing and there's no radiating. I mean, I'm okay. I've had worse. And
Everybody should know, by the way, right now, I offered Shari to postpone recording.
Liar.
We're not forcing. Who's being authentic now, Shari?
I'm a card.
That's good.
Yeah, you did offer. You said you want to reschedule because I am thinking a little slower and I have a very fast brain, and sometimes my mouth cannot connect with the thoughts. And so I'm actually enjoying the slowness I'm feeling right now.
No, that's good. That's good. I mean, again, it's just, resiliency, right? You dust it off and you do the best you can. And, I think that's important. Okay. So enough, at least for the minute, about poor Shari's incident yesterday. And by the way, if you hear this, hopefully by the time it's recorded, it will just be positive news anyway, but a great prayer for Shari's husband, as well as her, to be protected from contracting this, because I haven't talked about this very much, but, I'm one of those people probably that sits in the middle of this whole pandemic, which is very, very serious, particularly serious for people that are immunocompromised, as well as elderly people. We should all be careful. We should all be safe, but you've also seen me, out living, quote unquote, my life to some degree and spending time with close people. And so I think that we're all walking in this place of like, we are pretty confident we need to work. We need to, we need to see some other people from time to time carefully. But the reality is, Shari was saying, like her husband's very careful and still it's kind of just made its way in. So a great prayer for him would be wonderful. I'll definitely be praying for him.
Thank you. Not to Tommy, I believe in prayer. So if you are going to say a prayer for him, Tommy is his name.
Awesome. We will. I will for sure. I will for sure. Okay, so when we talked the first time, and when I did a little bit of digging before we chatted, I saw this book that you had written, and as we talked about this idea of skeletons in the closet, and particularly naming them, it was super fascinating to me because I've spent a lot of time. I mean, definitely over the last 20 years, but more so over the last 3 to 5, really identifying the things in my life that I found victory in moving past, but I didn't actually extract all from that I could, because it was either such a traumatic event or so difficult or whatever that it was like, phew, I'm over it. I'm past it. Now I don't want to talk about it or deal with it anymore. And I feel like, and I think we talked about this a little bit before, like, I feel like a huge mistake in that is we miss out on the opportunity that devastation has to teach us, to grow us, to equip us, to help us be who we are today. So I would love to hear a little bit about, your perspective there, but also just how that title came to be, how the book came to be. And then I'm sure I'll jump in at different times as I hear things, but I would just love to hear how that came to be for you, because that's not easy.
That was a lot. There's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
In my slow-moving, concussed brain.
I'll keep going back.
So if I miss something, just interrupt me and jab me in. So the first piece I think you asked about was what happens in the devastation. I love that word, devastation. I believe in delicious words, and that's a delicious word. And somebody's listening going, what is so delicious about devastation, right? Like, this chick's nuts. And a little. So when I say that, because devastation it really depicts what trauma does to you. It
Mm,
does. It devastates you. And trauma is not to be compared, right? So my trauma, it's easy for you to look at anything that's really happened in my life if you haven't had the sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, child abuse. I mean, any homelessness. If you haven't experienced those things, it's easy to go, oh God, what I experience is nothing compared to yours.
mm,
And I think that that's where where devastation is so important, because there's no measure to it. Okay. And there's no comparing. So your trauma is your trauma, and it deserves recognition, and it deserves a place on the
mm,
same shelf right next to mine. And because you matter as a human.
mm,
And so what happens matters because it affects us. And when we are young, we all experience trauma. There's not
mm.
a single one of us that gets out of here not having experienced childhood trauma.
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
Okay, so before
And
before we go on, because I want, because you said that word many times, and so I think that I want to stick there for a second. Have you read the book or heard of the book called The Coddling of the American Mind?
no, but let
Okay.
me write that down.
So it was birthed out of an article that was written, and he ended up going on to write a book. The author's name is Jonathan Haidt. And so what's interesting, and I would really like to hear your perspective on this. So on one hand, generally, I completely agree in the sense that we have all experienced, almost every single person has experienced some form of trauma, a traumatic event. I think where I'm challenged sometimes, this book actually speaks to this a little bit, is we have assigned trauma to everything. And so where, again, not that it doesn't ill
And
affect
not
you.
everything.
Yeah, well, it's like, things can ill affect you, but for you, and I'm not going to impose this upon you if this isn't your story, but you said this word, or you said this term. So it's like, if you experience sexual abuse, that is far more devastating, with more mental, emotional, physical, and practical short and long-term effects than you being called a jerk by somebody one time on the playground. And I know that, like,
That's not trauma.
yeah, well, yeah, and so I'm dividing those things that far because today we live in a society that, in one sense, and I don't want to overdo this, but where everybody's claiming that you've offended me, you have imposed upon my well-being, right? And so I know you're not saying that. Just I want to kind of insert that
Let's
in, and so
clarify.
yeah, please.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm so glad you said that, because I don't want to fall in that bucket.
Yeah,
Okay. Because you will hear me say, just because you're offended doesn't mean you're right.
yeah, it's good. It's good.
Okay. And we can't hide behind, and that's actually where I was going with this, right? Is you can't hide behind your trauma.
It's good.
Okay. So I have been sexually abused. I was raped at 18. Okay.
So
And
sorry.
I have had my jaw broken by my partner. Okay. So I have experienced all of the extremes
Gosh.
of abuse. Okay. And I have been emotionally abused. I have been gaslit. Um, I had trauma as a child. And um, I actually found out when I was 50 that when I was 8 or 9 years old, in the book I said I was 9, but in my memories I was 8. Anyhow, but it didn't matter. I was a kid. my whole life, my whole big life up until I was 8 or 9 years old, I did not believe that my father was my father. And I attributed a lot of the way I was treated in my household to that belief. Okay. And I was treated very differently than my little sister. And it was very noticeable by the time she was 5, and she's no longer living. But when she was, that 2.5 years difference, though, even from an early age, was glaring to me. And so I insisted. And at the age of 9, though, my parents finally sent me to a psychologist because they wanted to find out what was wrong with me. And the long and the short of it is, I have a very high IQ. I won't share it. It's over 130, under 180. Okay, I'm not freaking Elon Musk or Einstein. I wish, or okay, but I fall into the everyday genius category, having an IQ over 130. And that's why my brain goes so fast. And that's also why I focus on overachievers and gifted adults, because we do differently, we behave differently in the world. We're often misdiagnosed with ADHD, borderline personality disorder, autism spectrum. We're often misdiagnosed. And so it really does take somebody who knows exactly, who does specialize in that, to really be able to help. And I digress. So I can go down a million rabbit holes. Okay. Remember, I told you it's good that I have a concussion. So you're watching this crazy brain in motion as I go through these things.
No, I'm tracking with you.
So the point being, so the point being is that doctor came back and he said, look, she's not the problem. She's going to be challenging because she needs more information. I've always been insatiably curious. I research and read a lot. I like opposing views because it challenges me, and I love a good debate. So, needless to say, at the age of 50, some years later, my mom sat down and said, "There's a chance your dad's not your dad."
Wow.
So they both knew that there was a chance, and I took a DNA test, and he's not my dad.
Wow.
Okay, so that's trauma as well. And there's a whole set of us, thousands of us in today, because you can take home DNA kits that are finding that we belong to family, different lineage of fathers. So my father is somebody famous, my birth biological father. He is David Rubin, that's one of my brothers. His name's Alan Rubin. He has written more books on social work, childhood trauma, and mental health than anybody in the country, really in the world. I think there's 130 publications. He is Brene Brown's main mentor and teacher, and he wants nothing to do with me.
Oh my gosh.
So just because you have training and just because you have history does not mean you have the tools or the skills to deal with it. And so we were talking about trauma, and somehow we went to, I've experienced literally the fall on the ice, nothing. The fall on the ice was nothing. It's like, okay. Like I've been hit by a truck, And so, so when I use the word trauma, I'm not talking about, I've been bullied a lot. I mean, in elementary school, they called me Frito Bandito, because I had like a little dark mustache. Yeah. Because kids are mean.
Terrible.
And I was smart. And yeah. So, I mean, I've been bullied a lot, but I never associated my bully with trauma. And the fact that you said that is really interesting because you used bullying as an example. And I've never once thought I had any trauma around that.
Yeah, well, and again, we would all say that, a poor interaction or two on the playground is different than a year-long, high school-long season of bullying, which is far more negatively impacting on that person. But even then, it's just, and those can have ill effects, but it's
But they can also have no effect.
correct. It's like, okay, so that actually, you saying that, that's a good way to kind of clarify that, and saying that just because it's happened doesn't mean that it's automatically going to have this long-standing devastating impact on your life. And again, that's not to discount the fact that it's happened. Like, we should address the fact that yes, it's happened, but I think that it's too easy today, and gosh, forgive me for saying this because someone's going to get pissed off, but it's too easy for people to play the victim as the result of something bad happening to them, And I think that not only hinders their personal life and growth, but it also discounts who truly has had devastating, circumstances.
Yes, it's the you get a trophy, you get a trophy, you get a trophy,
Yes.
you get a trophy. Okay. And so you don't have to work hard so that you actually get a freaking trophy.
Yeah.
Okay. So the name of my book is My Skeletons Have Name: How I Went from Victim to Hero. Okay. And I was a victim. I had to learn. So, that's where we started. So you were asking me, about the level of devastation, what do you do, right? And the reality is, I thought I had healed a lot of my pain and my had changed. Oh my gosh, leaps and bounds, really. Okay, I'm afraid to use the word leap. I might fall down. And it was like,
Willing it back into existence.
no jumping. Wrap me in bubble wrap. So the point being is, I thought I had really done these things, but I had skimmed past them. I had addressed them, but I had skimmed past them. Why? Because it freaking hurts. Okay, and it's hard. It's hard. And until we can feel neutral about something that has happened to us, it's not healed. That's how you know you've healed, is when you can be neutral. And so, like, when we had the school shooting, and your face is like, where the hell is she
No.
going?
I'm with you. I'm intently listening.
You haven't read my book. You have not read my book, so you've got to read it. So when my middle son was 5, a neo-Nazi had driven down from Washington and decided to get off and get gas in Granada Hills, California. And he saw a Jewish community center on the sign, and he thought he'd go kill the next generation of Jews, and my kids were there. So I was the first civilian on scene.
Jeez.
And my son was covered in blood. So he lived, okay? My kids are alive, and people said, yeah, but they're alive. There's no trauma. Now, remember, this was 1999. It was August 10th, 1999. Okay? We knew nothing about trauma like we do today. Okay? So none of us were treated. Well, that turned into the worst PTS tailspin of my life. It took me into addiction. It took me into horrible behavior, okay? And my kids were traumatized. And it didn't show up much later. And I couldn't talk. I was trying to remember why I brought that up. I couldn't talk about it for almost 11 years. Because I would literally go back there. When being the first civilian on scene, it sounded like the opening scene in, what's the movie where they say, I love the smell of napalm, Apocalypse Now. Okay, it sounded like the beginning of the movie Apocalypse Now with the Vietnam War scene, the helicopters, okay? If I heard a helicopter even in the distance, my body would freeze and go into shock. I mean, that's trauma, man, right?
Yeah.
But I can talk, look, I just talked about it. Okay,
Yep.
I'm like, here's what happened. Because I had to deal with it. you can't be who you're meant to be. You can't be your authentic self until you've dealt with the skeletons in your closet, man.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
And some of them are choices. I mean, some of my shit is mine. Like I created it, you know?
yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I think that, and I can personally relate in so many different ways. And I think the one that is the easiest for me to see the way that things can be affected differently so I think I had shared with you that my wife and I and a few of our friends were in Las Vegas when the mass shooting took place, and we lost one of our best friends that night. And so, you know, devastating, right? Life changing. Like if I, concentrated right now, closing my eyes, I could still look out and see just,
Yeah.
What was going on. And every once in a while I'll have a dream, a really, really loud, sudden noise will still create a startle. But it hurts still today to think about a lot of that. But my post-traumatic stress is far less, and I went through some seasons of anxiety and depression as a result of it, far less than other people that were there and experienced maybe quote unquote less, in the sense that maybe they didn't lose anybody, but they still, I mean, we're 4 years removed, 3.5 years removed. They still can't even leave their house. Like they can't go to work. And so I think that's what's so important is equal things happen to us, external circumstance, but how that works internally, not because we're smarter or better, it just works different. And so I think it's so important to diagnose and address things as they happen to individuals versus blanketing all this stuff, which is something that you're illustrating so well. Like we don't talk about that enough. It's just like, oh, something bad happened. Yep, I get it. You're going to have to go through all these steps. And it's like, I don't think that works for everybody the same.
I don't eat well, so I don't either, and that's why I have really made it my mission to talk about what it's actually. You asked me why did I write my book, right? So I wrote my book because I felt like the crap I've experienced and been through, both by choice and by chance. Okay, because I've also had a lot of fabulous, wonderful things that are people can't even imagine happening, right? So right now we're just talking about the garbage. We're not talking about all the wonderful things. The fact that I wasn't supposed to get pregnant and I have 3 beautiful children that I had while taking the pill. Okay,
Wow.
so we're not talking about the miracles that God has given me either. Okay, but
Mm-hmm.
we're talking about something very specific. And I wrote the story because I really wanted people that felt like their burden was so heavy and their shame was so thick, because it's the shame that keeps us hurting.
Yeah. Yep.
And I wanted them to understand by illustrating that I could do it. And it seemed like the trauma, it was like, right? It was like one thing after another, after another, after another for 50 some odd years.
Yep.
Okay, we're not talking about a day. And that I could still achieve wonderful things. And I could still live a life beyond my wildest imagination. And I'm just an ordinary gal, right? And the fact that I have a high IQ has nothing to do with it. Okay, that's a burden. It's not a that's not a blessing, that's a burden. And and I don't share that. I don't It came up for a reason. I don't wander around. It's not in the book. It's not, and I'm writing my second book. And so the last one was My Skeletons Have Names, and you said, how did I come up with that? And I have no freaking idea. I was literally walking and I was like, my freaking skeletons have names. And it wasn't until I pulled them out and I embraced them that I could really heal. And
Yeah.
that really is the key to all of our shame, is we've got to pull it out. We've got to look at it. We've got to meet it where we are. Not where we were, but where we are. And when we do that, we can do it with anything.
Yeah. Well, I can hear I can hear why this is so important as you're coaching people, particularly the quote unquote overachiever, because again, like I just happened to step into so much shit my whole life. But in October of 2016, so a year before my own personal devastation, I worked with a girl, a young woman, 30 years old, life on fire, married, straight A student her whole life, valedictorian, captain of the cheerleading team. She was killing it at work. She was my counterpart. I was leading sales. She was leading client service. And she stepped into a period which started with some self-doubt. She was setting expectations for herself that were far greater than anybody else could set for her. And she didn't know how to figure it out. She started getting anxiety, depression. So she goes to the doctor. The doctor starts prescribing her all kinds of stupid ass medication that's just further messing up her brain, causing her to doubt herself. And she starts turning into kind of this walking zombie half the time, right? And so that's not working, clearly. And so then she goes to another doctor, and I've bit my tongue in naming this company or this place because it's very well known, but she goes to this other very well known treatment center. They do some like shock therapy on her brain to try and get it back, working well.
With an A?
Oh yeah, it does. And I watched then her go from at least just being medicated and not being able to do much, which was bad, but it was nothing like when she started going there and they told her that just keep doing this and eventually like this is going to basically shock you back to normal. And I'm overstating that, but literally that's what it was. Like, stop taking your medication, just do this. And on a Thursday afternoon, she left the office at 12:30, sitting in a meeting with my son.
Herself, please.
Yes, she did. She went home that evening, put a gun to her head, and killed herself. And this young girl had her whole life ahead of her. She was at the top of her game in what she was doing, but one day she could have gone on to run a company or this country. And what was even worse was months later, we left her office intact for the longest period of time because nobody wanted to like desecrate, we didn't know what to do, right? And her husband came and took some stuff. And one day I went into her office and I was sitting there tearing up, just thinking about what she went through, because she and I had some deep conversations about her faith in God.
I can't even deal with this right now.
Yeah, so brutal. And I remember reading some of her journal entries, and it was this tension of begging God to remove this from her, and at the same time trying to figure out why she couldn't just do better. She
was gifted and she had trauma. So I already know I'm not a doctor. I'm not licensed to diagnose people. Okay. But you can be an expert and recognize yourself in anybody, any day of the week. Okay. I'm willing to bet you are. So willing to bet it. But overachievers have a story in their brain that tells them they're not enough. And at some point, and it can happen many times, okay? But being a high achiever is what we aim for, not overachiever, okay? And the reason we become overachievers is because we're trying to prove our value in hitting the next mark. Yep. And it starts as a child, okay? And that's where we get into trouble. And so it's our expectations aren't met, and we create the limiting belief that we're not good enough, and we go on and we usually soar. And if you find somebody like what you just said, on the outside, she has the perfect life, okay? Now, even when I was going through my shit, I still had people thought I could do anything. People still think, oh, she could do anything. Just look at her, and like, I probably can. But it's going to take me a long time, and I may suffer a lot through it. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'd be willing to try. That's what I should say. I'd be willing to figure it out, right? But the point is, those of us who often look so good on the outside are tortured on the inside. And when you started to tell a story, I'm like, he's going to tell me she died. I mean, I tried to commit suicide 3 different times. And had I had a gun, I would not be here.
Yep.
Okay. But I was so afraid of not being successful and shooting myself because nothing went my way, right? That I was convinced I'd end up just drooling on myself. That I'd be the one, I'd be that fraction of a percentage that, so I never tried a gun because I knew, and the same thing with hanging, like the last time I was going to kill myself, I thought about hanging myself because I was like taking pills didn't work, slitting my wrists didn't work, right? I was like, this man tried to kill me over and over and over again. That didn't work, right? I'm like, what am I going to do? This is not working. And this is not about me. This is about her. But I believe I save lives.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I think it is about you in this sense. And, you know, why you're telling the story, why you write the book. This is the same thing that when I talk to people and they tell me, you know, like, you're making an impact, you're doing that. Like, I know you're not telling your story, and I can tell already in the time we've spent together now, in the short time before, you telling your story, and you said this earlier, is empowering other people to embrace theirs, to address theirs, to tell theirs, to lean into theirs, to realize that they don't have to live the rest of their life hiding the things that are holding them back from living the life they've been created to live, right? I mean, that's the whole point, is like, we need to name it, we need to claim it, we need to figure out how to deal with it. A lot of times for people, you know, in that category of, I'm killing it, I'm achieving everything and then some, like, that's why somebody like you exists. If we don't deal with that, you know, most of us are not capable. Thank God, most of us are not capable of taking our own lives, much for the reason that you said right there. And that is a wonderful thing. But that doesn't mean that we're not going to not live the rest of our life miserably, even though we're successful and happily in a marriage. Like, all these things happen. And yet inside we are just a shell and crumbling because we aren't willing to do the real shit that it's going to take.
Well, and I think it's because there's been so many shortcuts.
Yep.
Okay. And it doesn't have to hurt. Okay, so when I'm working with somebody, I don't drag them through the mud or over the freaking gravel so that they end up broken and bloody like a therapist. Okay. Because what really worked for me, I mean, I'd been in and out of therapy for, I mean, what felt like 100 years. And every time I left, I was more depressed and in more pain than when I went in there. So I'd stop going because I'm like, I don't want to go there to feel like shit. What is this?
Yep.
Like what you just told me about your friend. Okay. And so then they start diagnosing you. Okay. And they want to put you on pills and this, that, and the other. And now I will tell you right now, I take medication. Okay. I have clinical depression. I take medication. Without it, I will die. Okay. How do I know? Because I've tried 100 million times to do it successfully and I need it.
Yep.
Okay. But I don't need Ritalin. First of all, I freaking was addicted to meth. Okay. Like, why are you giving someone in recovery
yeah,
freaking something that they'll never get enough of?
Yep.
But because I didn't want to feel the way I felt, I took it. It made me feel crazy. I didn't take it. Okay. I probably did everything your girlfriend did. I know, not girlfriend. Okay.
Yeah. No, I get you.
I probably did everything she did. They gave me like Depakote and they gave me this. And it's like, what are you people doing? And it wasn't until about a decade ago, a girlfriend of mine convinced me, and my life was on cloud nine for how I felt about it. Okay. I was living life on my terms. And she said, you know, you should do this coaching thing. And I was like, oh, I've done everything. I don't want to do anything else. I don't have the money. What's right? And she goes, look, I'd help you. She goes, but if you don't have any skin in the game, you're not going to take it seriously. So,
God, that was good advice.
Finally, I said, okay, I'm going to do it. Okay. And I did it. And so it changed my life. And it was when I decided that I was going to do these things that I now do. Because had somebody done that for me when I was 17 and homeless, okay, I could have saved myself years and years and years of suffering. Had I done something like that at 34, I wouldn't have become an addict. I can place it, okay, because coaching by somebody who is trained, okay, and has the not paper credentials, but experience credentials,
Yep.
and we all get them. Okay, I have plenty of them, and we all get them, and we're not. I am so like yesterday. I was saying it will change your life, and it should change it in 20 minutes. Okay, so it should change your life in 20 minutes. It won't be lasting change, but you will know in the first 20 minutes of who you're talking to is legit, because you should feel different.
Yep. So good.
I mean,
So good.
I guarantee my coaching, I will give you your money back, because if you don't feel different, there's something wrong with us together. Okay. I will refund if you don't feel that you got the value from our work together. Why? Because it works. Okay. I'm not worried about it. And, I was talking to my coach yesterday, and I said, I'm really annoyed with the coaching industry. And I'm not alone. I'm sure you could go, oh yeah, okay, because
A million
there's
times over.
so much smoke being blown up people's butts,
Yep.
okay? And false promises and empty this and take a magic pill and take a course and do this and do that. Okay, those people are not in the coaching business. They're in the money business. Those people
Right.
are looking to make money. Okay, I charge because it's my business, and let me tell you, I undercharge.
Yep.
Okay, but I am not in the business to become a millionaire off of the backs of others. I'm in the business to become a millionaire from changing lives.
Yep.
Okay, you will never see me giving an empty promise, because I'm here to change lives. If I'm never become a millionaire, I never become a millionaire. Like, right? So that's not my goal. My goal is to change lives, because nobody should suffer the way I suffered. Nobody should take their life because they can't be seen as who they are. Like, nobody's story is so bad it can't be heard. Nobody's.
Yep. That's good. Okay. I think on one hand, I
Wow,
want
you
to,
get me riled up.
well, off of what you said alone, I could go on about a 12-minute rant on how shitty half of the, 90% of the coaches are out there, and some of the biggest names in the business, and how terrible they are. But I'm going to digress for the time being. And I also feel like that's a good spot to land the plane completely because of this. I think it's important because, what I've tried to accomplish over the last, couple of months of the podcast is, instead of here's the 7 things you need to do to change your life, which can be very helpful and practical at times, in the right context. What I'm trying to do is to invite people into a conversation in which we do what we just did, which was, I pray to God. Like, I literally pray. I talk about prayer. I really mean it. I have deep faith in God. I believe that, there is so much that comes in it. And wherever you land there, I don't care. But I pray to God that through the conversation I've had with you today, Shari, that somebody hears that I do not have to go on living my life the way that I'm living. And probably for most people that will hear this, they're not living in a state of utter devastation like you were at seasons of, in seasons of your life. It's more of, there's just something off. There's just something that I'm missing and I can't figure it out. And I damn sure guarantee that if you work with the right person, in this case, if something you said with that, or that Shari has said has resonated, reach out to her, because eventually, question after question, digging deep into your story, you are going to end up figuring out that it was something 3 years ago, 17 years ago, 57 years ago, that is unresolved, that needs to be addressed. When it is finally realized, your whole life will change. And so that's why I feel like this is a great place to land, is I feel like in the way that you finished, you accomplished that so well for people today. So, just thank you.
Thank you.
And look at that. Concussion, black eye, nothing stopped you from doing what you needed to do today.
I made a commitment.
Remember, disclaimer, I did not require it. She decided to do it, but it was a blessing. No, I really appreciate that. And I'm going to pick up a copy of the book because I definitely want to check it out. I mean, just the title alone is, resonates with, with so much of what I think, but hearing bits and pieces of your story, I definitely want to hear more, not just because I'm intrigued to know more about you, but because there's things that I can always continue to learn and grow just for myself as a human, as a husband, as a father, in so many different ways. So how can they best get in contact with you? We'll put this into the show notes too, but how can they best get in contact with you, find a copy of the book? Like where do they go?
You are such a blessing, Ryan. You really are. You're a blessing in my life. So ShariLueck.com, ShariLueck.com, ShariLueck.com. You can even read, 4 chapters on my website.
Awesome. Okay, cool. All right. So you heard it there. We'll put the link in the show notes. We'll make sure if you have a question, a thought, a concern, this is one of those times that I say, do not let you get in the way of you. Do not let your pride, your lack of a willingness to dig in, it's probably going to hurt. And I just say, just get it together. Like, it's time that you finally address these things, because no one should go on living with unresolved things like this in their life. So connect with Shari, reach out to her. Any questions you got for her, feel free to ask her. Anything you have for me, feedback, questions, concerns, whatever you want, I'm here for you as well. And as I say, as often as I possibly can remember to say, be you, be happy, be authentic. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you for listening to Authentic Conversations with Ryan James Miller. If you found value in today's episode, please subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform and share it with others. To connect with Ryan and learn more, visit ryanjamesmiller.com.